Good morning, FlowChat connector. In this video, I'm going to walk through the 3 ego states of a sales call and how to use them to close more. What's happening, FlowChat connector? Sean here, back at you with another high ticket tune-up. Hope you're doing great today. It's Thirsty Thursday. Don't forget Thursday's the best day for sales and prospecting, statistically proven over the last 20 years. So if you're not out reaching out to new people, talking and making new connections and having opportunities open up, do so today. Make it your goal to connect with at least 5 new people that you've never met before that could possibly invest with you, because when you do, it automatically leads to more deals, right? It doesn't take too long to do, and that's awesome. But today we're going to dive into some awesome stuff. We're going to talk about the 3 ego states of a sales call. So if you've never heard any of this, this is your first kind of introduction to this. This is going to teach you how to close differently. This is going to teach you how to close more often. Why? Because that's the kinds of things that we talk about, because we're always revenue, always relevant here in the FlowChat community. So thank you for being a part of this. Let's dive into this. I'll make the screen just a little bit bigger. Okay, so with that said, let's dive into what are the 3 ego states of a sales call and how do we use them to close more? By the way, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'll go live and just answer any questions you drop in the comments below here. That will be awesome. So first and foremost, what are the 3 ego states of a sales call? Well, you have something called the parent state. So this is one of 3. Parent state is this. It's where the info is stored about such things as what is good, what is bad, what is right and wrong, what is appropriate, and what is inappropriate. You probably learned these things when you were a little kid, and they were taught to you by the elders, whether they be your parents or the people that raised you, or maybe the close-knit friends that you have or something like this. So the parent state is developed from records that were placed in your head from when you were a little kid. The second state that we have is what we call the adult state. The adult state is very logical, analytical, rational part of our behavioral framework. It weighs things like pros and cons, the pluses, the minuses, the upsides, and the downsides. The adult state doesn't really have too much emotion. Rather, it's just info in, info out. Let's make a decision. Does this work logically, right? So that's the second state. Now, we all have the ability to be a parent, right? We can go and parent somebody, parent a kid, or we can actually be an adult. Say you're going out to bowling with your friends, you're going to shoot the breeze about anything bowling, and that's more of that adult back and forth banter, right? And then the last one is what we call the child state. So this is where many of our decisions originate. Here's what I mean. It's that little 6-year-old inside of us who, feeling a particular emotion at a particular time, says, I want this. So you've probably felt that where you're like, I want this, or I want to do that, right? Or perhaps it's, I don't want this, or I don't want to do that, right? And so we have this ability to change these 3 different states. And what's really crazy is when I learned this, it was developed by a guy named David Sandler, and David Sandler created an amazing sales training organization. And what he revolutionized how sales should be done from the psychology standpoint. Why? Because he spoke with a bunch of really smart people, and this is what he found. So here's kind of the layout of all the different things, the different 3 ego states. So the first one is, again, like I said, parent. Within parent, you can be a nurturing parent. Example, hey, go up and wash your hands for dinner. We're almost ready. Or, oh, you got an owie. Let me help you with that. Or that's what a nurturing parent is. I don't have to give you more examples for you to already know that. And then you can have a critical parent, right? If you're the critical parent role, then you're saying things like, you know what, you're doing the wrong thing, go up and wash your hands and get ready to come down for dinner, right? It's that critical, like, go do your homework before you can play, the critical side of being a parent. So nurturing and critical, that's the 2 buckets there. Next, you have the adult state. The adult state, like I mentioned, is more logical. This is the info in, info out. There's no emotion. There's no commands or embedded commands. You know, if you've ever learned NLP, they have these things called embedded commands. When you're a critical parent or even a nurturing parent, you drop embedded commands. In the adult state, you don't, right? This is just very simply, oh, you know what? Hey, little Johnny, we're going to have dinner in 5 minutes. Please be ready for dinner. Right. And that's all you could say. Right. So that's the adult state. And then lastly, we have the child state. Child state, there's kind of 2 positions, 2 buckets. One of them is the adaptive child. This is that child that's going to be like, okay, I'll run upstairs and wash my hands. Boom. You're submissive to the command or the embedded command. Right. And then you have the rebellious child. This is the person that was like, I'm not washing my hands before dinner. My hands are clean. I used sanitizer or whatever, right? So that's the rebellious child. So these are the kind of 6 states, 7 states that anybody can be in a selling conversation at any time. So how do we use them in sales? Because that's, now that you have the definitions and everything else, like let's move into more of the sales side of things. So if we had the sales pro and where they should be versus the prospect and where they should be during a sales call, it's our job as a sales professional to make sure this happens. This is how you're going to create deals faster using psychology. So first of all, I'm going to talk about being a sales pro. So when you enter a conversation as the sales professional, there's a couple of places that you don't ever want to be. Right? The first place you never want to be in a sales pro's position in a conversation is the child. You never want to be an adaptive or a rebellious child when a prospect is talking to you. Why? Because that means the prospect has control. How does this happen? Typically, the person who is talking is usually starting from the child state. So what does that tell us? We need to keep our mouths closed and ask more questions. Get the prospect to talk more, because as the prospect talks more, it's going to naturally help them to move back down into their child. The child's the one that usually speaks the most. The parent is the one that speaks with wisdom, and the adult is the one that says, yeah, this is a valid wisdomatic thing, and the child can go. When you're trying to close a deal, you have to make sure that all 3 of these ego states are in alignment. And so that's what I'm working on with you today. So as a sales professional, never put yourself in the adaptive or the rebellious child role. Okay, the second place you never want to be as a sales professional in a conversation is the critical parent. There's one exception for this, which is very, very infrequently used. But for the most part, the the sales professional, you don't want to be a critical parent saying, hey, do this, or you need to do this, or you must do that. If you're that person, the prospect's going to be like, and run away. Like, don't command me, person. I'm not going to be. And again, when you become critical parent, they become rebellious child. That's what happens. So just think through that in your mind, right? Instead of making a command or telling them to do something as a critical parent would, be the nurturing parent. And so the 2 places you want to be as a sales professional is, number 1, you want to be a nurturing parent 80% of the time. So valuable, right? So instead of saying you should do this or you should do that, turn this into, well, have you ever tried that before? That's the difference between a critical parent question and a nurturing parent question of the same thing. So it's like, hey, you need to try organic outreach. Or have you ever tried organic outreach? It's the exact same question coming from the exact same ego state, but just one was stated from critical and one was stated from nurturing. When you as a sales professional can get here and stay here 80% of the time, you're going to win more deals, period. End of story, right? And so the second place that we need to be, again, of course, is going to be here. We need to be able to rationalize with logic all of the stuff that we're suggesting. So as a sales professional, we want to be suggestive 80% of the time as a nurturing parent and not critical or not child. And then the 20% of the time, once we've implanted the seeds in their brain, we need to come back and help them to justify or walk that path to do it logically, right? Okay, so now you understand as a sales pro, 80% of the time you want to be a nurturing parent role in your mind, psychology-wise, and then 20% as an adult, factual, in, out. All right, so let's go over the prospect side. What happens over here? So first and foremost, here's the places you never want the prospect to be during a sales conversation, right? Number 1, never ever have them get to that nurturing or critical parent role. The only time this is okay for them to be is when they're telling their backstory, usually in the first little bit of the conversation to learn a little bit about their business. Other than that, our job is to move from, because if we're actively listening to a backstory that a prospect is telling us, typically that parent's going to be sitting in this nurturing parent role, or that prospect, and we will be the adaptive child where we have our hand over our mouth here and we're just listening to their backstory. We're like, oh, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool, right? And we don't, like we form opinions in our head when we're listening to those stories. So if the prospect is speaking about their backstory, you're probably going to be in a child state, right? Unless you're aware of this and you know kind of how to move states. So the second place you never want to be or let the prospect be during a sales conversation is the rebellious child. If you find that you're getting pushback can only typically come from either here or for here. And these are the 2 places that you never want your prospect to be, right? Makes sense. So how do we do this? Where do we want the prospect to be and what percentage of the time? So first and foremost, we want the prospect to always be in that almost adaptive child role about 80% of the time. So to do this, we need to establish credibility, show that we're a trusted advisor, make sure we understand expertise, listen to the prospect as much as possible to understand the problems, the concerns, frustrations, and struggles and the challenges that they have, and then make suggestions from this nurturing parent until the adaptive child says, I want that, right? When you've gotten to that place, you've actually created the first part of the close for any sales conversation. The second place you want the prospect to be, again, is going to be that adult info in, info out. Here's what's interesting. 20% is a sales pro, 20% is a prospect. So this means the conversation should majority of the time where you as a sales pro should be a nurturing parent and they should be in the adaptive child role, right? So how do we use this to sell? We start and we spend the majority of our conversation as a nurturing parent, as if you're the sales professional speaking to an adaptive child. Get that framework right in your mind and then have the conversation from a very suggestive, friendly, kind of same side of the table conversation instead of combat, right? And this is going to help you get to what we call the emotional close. We get that emotional close in the sales conversation when the prospect does this. I want that. They do this thing called the lean in. On a Zoom meeting, you can see it when their head and their body comes forward, or they say suggestively like, yes, this is a right solution for me, after you've explored everything else that's out there. And when they say, and then you say something like, yo, I want to work with you. Am I someone that you'd want to work with? And they say, yes, emotionally, that deal is closed. Once that happens in the sales conversation, that usually happens right in about the middle of the sales, or should, right about the middle of the sales conversation. Secondly, then the next thing is this. Well, where do we go after that? We've got the emotional close. Hey, I want to work with you. You want to work with me? Yeah, that sounds great. Like, we're going to work together and we're going to make it rain. Yeah, this is exciting. Woo! Right? Again, you're the nurturing parent. Your prospect is the adaptive child. They're all excited. They want it. Now you have to shift your prospect from this position into this position. You can do it with one question. The question I typically say is, okay, well, we agree we want to work together. We know that I can solve your problem. Sounds like you got the right amount of dollars to make the investment with me. Let's just kind of iron out all the rest of the details. Does that sound okay? And then now, again, I did that as a nurturing parent. The adaptive child says, oh, yeah, I totally want that. Let's figure out the details because that's the next step. And I've moved the prospect from child into adult. And so now I can shift myself from a nurturing parent into adult, and I can say, great, let's talk about your buying process. Who besides yourself is involved in that? Okay, cool. Now, when you've bought a product like this before, what was that like? What are the things you liked? What did you dislike? And I'm just getting info. And now I understand everything about this prospect. And then at the end, I just go for the logical close. With one other question, I say, hey, is this something you think you can do? Right? When we agree that we can solve their problem, we've moved them in the States to the right place. We understand they have the budget. We understand how they make decisions. And then we just ask, hey, is this something you think you can do? And they're going to say, majority of the time, will say, yes, this is great. And you say, okay, one last thing I need to get logically, because we're ending the conversation adult to adult. When's the next step going to happen? And what's the clear future? What's the very next step we need to accomplish? And then they say, oh, it's probably this. Okay, perfect. Let's put that on the document and move forward. And when you can play this way in this framework, in the psychology behind these states, guess what you're going to do? You're going to win a tremendous amount of deals, probably way more deals than you ever have possibly thought before. So a couple of Junaid, there's Junaid. He says, I'm in a parent state all day long. Yeah, man. Well, don't be. Right? Fix yourself. Try to change yourself up, down, left, right. And in fact, I know I've spoken with you multiple times. I know that you spend some time in the adult state too. So that's cool. And then you said, of course, love this. Yeah, I'm glad that you love this, Junaid. It's really, really valuable and powerful stuff. So with that said, guys, that's the secret, right? You want to close more deals using the 3 ego states. This is the solution. And remember, what do? This gives you the ability to close differently. Absolutely, because nobody knows about this stuff except you just heard it from me first. And secondly, if you want to close differently and you want to close more often, this is the secret formula, and it's very easy to follow. So with that said, you've just been tuned up. I hope this has been valuable. And if it has been valuable, make sure to smash that like, love button so we can feed the algorithm gods and get this content out to more people, because I know they need it. And secondly, make sure and subscribe to the channel, turn the notifications on, hit that bell so that I can continue feeding you with sales nuggets 3 times a week, because that's what I do for our tribe, because I just love sales and I want people to get better at communications. With that said, have a great day, be safe, sell more, close deals, win, and make impact.